Welcome to Ask an Advisor. I'm Krista DiBiase here with Wes Moss.
Hey, Krista D.
Again in your lovely jacket. Your
Still,
fall.
I'm liking this fall weather blazer jacket.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And today on Ask an Advisor, we will get to your questions, which you can ask at clark.com/ask. And also, you're going to talk about the housing market, which good news for buyers, not so good for sellers anymore. The market has shifted.
Yeah, it's a buyer's market.
Yeah.
In most of the country.
And then I'm excited to hear this story. I don't know what it is, but it's about a second act career.
It's a 1 in a million second act career.
Okay.
It's almost so crazy that it's hard to, it's somewhat unrelatable, but very relatable all at the same time. And it's a good lesson.
Someone in their 50s taking on a very unusual career. And I love the idea of second careers and second acts. And
I do too. I'm always looking for good stories around this, and we found one.
I just read something today. It's so weird. I got this notification from this website, and it had this blurb about how, some people have 5 careers in their lifetime and how you should never be afraid to try new things. And so I don't know. We're living in a simulation potentially.
Well, you somewhat have gone from radio to podcast.
I mean, sort of. I was a web producer when I started out my
count.
career. I've definitely worked across media for sure, but I've stayed in media, and thank goodness, what a career I've had with Clark. But I did have so many jobs before I actually started this career.
Yeah, when were you? How old were you when you started in radio?
Oh gosh, I was 25 or 20. Yeah, 25,
What did you
26.
do before 25?
I was a web producer, but before that, when I first got out of college, I joined a temp agency, and I had a lot of different temp jobs.
Oh.
Receptionist, I categorized art. I was a barista, and I started babysitting when I was 11, and I always had jobs in high school. Yeah,
and art categorization.
Yeah, I worked tons of retail through college and food service, and I've done a lot of jobs. I was always someone who liked to work, so.
I'm with you. Same
all right.
thing.
So we are going to talk about both those things, but you're going to start out with the housing market.
Let's talk about housing. And it's always good to, and I guess I'll couch this by saying some of these markets that I'm going to talk about, I guess here, we're in a unique spot. And I found a good way to track overall buyers and sellers when it comes to housing. And when you have an imbalance like we do today, it's the most extreme buyer's market we've seen in a very, very long period of time. So I'm not saying that people are ready to look at move and go somewhere else, but there are some good deals. And I think the deals are going to continue to get better. So I want to talk about the top 10 or 15 cities that have the biggest imbalance. So many sellers, in some cases 150% more sellers than buyers. And what does that mean? That means you have a buyer's market. You've got a lot of people saying, please buy my house. And that's very different from what it was. If you go back to 2020 to all the way to 23, we had a ton of buyers. We had 2.5 million buyers, and we had at one point 1.5 million sellers. So it was a seller's market. It was a great time to sell your place. And it's almost completely inverted. Now, it's taken a long period of time. This goes all the way back to 2020. Here we are in the end of 2025. But this is new data from Redfin. There are 1.4 million home buyers right now. That's the lowest level since 2013. So we have way less buyers because prices are still expensive. Mm-hmm. And we've started to see some prices come down. But it's still really expensive to buy a house right now because of housing inflation. At the same time, there are almost 2 million sellers. Mm. So 2 million people trying to sell, only 1.4 million people trying to buy. That's 36% more sellers than buyers, and the widest gap we've seen in over a decade. And the question is, where, Wes? Where should I go if I'm looking? And this is just... And when you think about moving geographically, it's such a big deal. You're not going to just look at a list of cities with good deals and then say, hey, well, let's move. But it's at least worth considering and understanding and knowing. So I'm going to start with, I want to get to that list. That's the candy. Let me go through some of the spinach first. Let's do we've got to talk about the most expensive markets. I think that's important to look at. And I'll just they're mostly where you would expect. It's California, it's New York, it's Seattle, and
Is Boston not on there? I'm surprised.
Boston is on there at number 9 out of 10 most expensive. The median, this is median, so of course there's way more expensive homes than this, but the median is about $740,000. And prices, and that's actually one of the very few, and I think this is 200, 300 cities in this that I sorted by. It's one of the very few balanced markets still. And New York. And the New York is still somewhat balanced. But then the rest of these super expensive markets are all buyers markets.
California,
San Diego,
California,
Los Angeles,
California.
Anaheim,
Yeah.
San Francisco, San Jose. Seattle, Washington is still on the list. That's a buyer's market. So it's the expensive Northeast, and then it's the West Coast, and that's nothing new. Now, at the same time, what are the least expensive markets? The least expensive, let's call it number, because this is near my hometown. 1, 2, 3. Number 5, least expensive, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at $285,000 is the median home price. It is a buyer's market there. St. Louis and Cleveland, 270, 250. So still very affordable, median-wise. Number 2, least expensive place, Metro in America, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
A very cool city.
It is a very cool city.
It
See,
really
this is where you start to say, well, wait, that's a really cool city. And it's really inexpensive. Houston, by the way, is number 15 or number 10, 331,000 median. And Detroit, 204, the least expensive of the group. But where are the best
Detroit's
deals?
had a renaissance, hasn't it? Like over the last
I spent a lot of time
years.
in Michigan.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be buying in Detroit necessarily, but there are lots of great areas right around there that I think are great. I was talking to Clark the other day, and I said something about Michigan and how it could be magical in the summer, and he just like fell off his seat. He's like, Michigan! Michigan! I've never heard anybody say Michigan. Clark, you got to join me in the summer. All right, where are the best deals? Here's what I think it's interesting. There in Nashville, Tennessee, there are essentially double the amount of sellers than buyers. There's 100% more sellers than buyers. Now, prices year over year are still up a little bit, but that relationship, you'd almost have to see prices start to come down. Tampa, Florida, 101% more sellers than buyers. Now, prices have started to come down there. Median is $370,000. But prices are down about 1% year over year. Jacksonville, San Antonio, West Palm Beach, Austin, Texas, 124% more sellers than buyers. And then you get to the top 2, and where you've got to start seeing prices come down. They're down a little bit year over year, but I could see this becoming more dramatic. Fort Lauderdale, 151%.
And probably a lot of that,
More
right? Aren't there
sellers than
issues
buyers.
with the condos in Florida are like really struggling because of the new rules and all the assessments?
You've got new rules, assessments. You have weather on top of weather. And it just is that much more expensive to live there beyond just the home price. And really what we saw is tons of we had a disproportionate amount of people go down to Florida, go down to Texas during
COVID.
the pandemic.
Yeah.
And this is unwinding. And then the number 1 imbalance in the country for major metro is Miami, Florida. 160% more sellers than buyers. And it's time to maybe just at least take a look, think about it now that you know these lists. We never know where we're going to end up, either for a work move, where we can find a deal, or for an early retirement.
There you go. All right. Are you ready for some questions?
Sure.
Jessica is in one of those expensive states, New York. Jessica says, I don't know if she's in New York City.
Who knows? It's so hyper local. It's hard to just say a state.
True. All right. So Jessica, although her area code does indicate New York City, she says, I think it's important for Wes to clarify that the Fed may be the fuel line for the overall economy, but it does not control mortgage rates. Last September of 24, the Fed cut rates by a whopping 0.5 percentage point, and mortgage rates shot up. In fact, the Fed cut 3 times between September of 24 and the end of the year, a total of 1%, and after shooting higher, then stayed right around 7%. The Fed is all about short-term rates, and mortgages loosely follow 10-year Treasuries. Too many people are waiting to buy a home, crossing their fingers that mortgage rates will drop when the Fed cuts. But wow, were we disappointed when that didn't happen last year. Anyway, I think it's worth explaining. People just hear the headlines and not the truth.
Jessica, it's a really good point, and I think you're bringing up this is important, is that yes, mortgage rates loosely follow the 10-year Treasury, but a lot of people don't track the 10-year Treasury, but that's where if you look at the two charts, the 10-year Treasury and mortgage rates, they're usually going to go somewhat in lockstep. But when the Fed cuts, you're right. It's you can see these adverse, almost the opposite of what you would expect. Now, a lot of that is because we talk so much about what the Fed is going to do. The market
pre-prices, right?
Pre-runs, it front runs what they think the Fed is going to do. And I have a chart here that is mortgage rates, Fed, and 10-year Treasury. And if you go to September of 2024, the Fed cut 0.5%, then another quarter, then another quarter. 1, 2, 3. So it was a full 1%. And to your point, Jessica, mortgage rates went from close to 6 up to 7. But before that, if you go back 4 or 5 months prior to those cuts happening, mortgage rates went from 7 down to, call it, closer to 6. So the market essentially knew the Fed was going to start cutting, so rates came down, mortgage rates came down. And if you look at mortgage rates and overlay that with the 10-year Treasury, that's a much closer relationship. So I think it's important to note, where do we stand today? We're at about a little less than 6.25 on the average 30-year fix. Remember, we were over 7 at the beginning of 2025. So Fed has cut somewhat this year. They just cut again this month. They cut again. They cut last month. So rates have come down. We've seen from 7 down to now 2.25. But to Jessica's point, I wouldn't be waiting for the Fed to do a cut just to see the mortgage rates moving. I think that we've already seen a nice mortgage relief.
For sure. Okay.
Still high, but much better than it was.
But historically, it's not terrible. I mean, they're pretty good. I mean, it's been so much higher, mortgage rates. I mean, I know that
but
we had
almost
such
not
low ones
much
before.
in our lifetime. I remember I think my first mortgage was, and every time we talk mortgages, my first mortgage was 10%. And mine I think was 6.5 or 7.
Yeah, mine was like 7.5 or 8. Yeah. Greg in Florida says, I'm retired with about $500K in my TSP. In 2026, the TSP will offer in-plan conversions. If the expense ratios are about equal, can you go through the pros and cons of staying in a TSP versus rolling it out to Vanguard? What am I missing? Is it just ERISA?
ERISA. Here's the thought. ERISA governs private employer retirement plans. The TSP is a federal plan. But Greg's right. There's a lot of protection when it comes to if you get sued or creditors coming after you, there's a high level of protection in the TSP plan, thrift savings plan. But there's also a lot of protection at the state level in IRAs. Now, it does depend on what state you are, and there's some nuances, but generally they both have a really high level of protection against either bankruptcy or and there's some limits, obviously, the amount that gets protected, and or creditors. So they're both, I think, really safe options. Ty goes to TSP, probably even a little more stringent when it comes to protection. I think the bigger question for you, Greg, is just, do you want options? The cost, if you go to TSP's ultra low in cost, Vanguard's ultra low in cost. The TSP has a very limited. TSP is like a great restaurant that has 5 things on the menu and they're all good. And you really don't need much more than that. Every time I go to a restaurant with a few good things on the menu, I say, why would you have a menu of 200 things? And you go to a place, they have 200 things on the menu and like 5 are good and the other 195 are okay. TSP is kind of like that. They have 5 real index options that cover a lot of the world. And If you want to keep things really simple, you can still get a lot of balance. You've got 2 safety options, fixed income, which is corporate, looks a lot like the aggregate bond index, and then you have an all government fund. And then 3 stock choices, essentially large US, small, and international. You can get the same thing at Vanguard, but then there's a lot of other options. So I think it's mostly just around optionality. The safety of the 2 are similar, pricing of the 2 are similar, but you just get a lot of options with Vanguard. And 2, you can get some help. You can get some service, and you can get a human to talk to. And if you want, they have an advisory program that's a really low annual percentage, and you get some planning around it. And I think that might be something to look into.
Okay, and then this one came in from Pamela in California. Wes, where should investors move their money when the interest rates go down? You stated that they go down overnight, and I'm 61. I'll retire in 4 to 5 years. I've moved 30% of my money into dry powder, 10% into bonds, and 60% in stocks. Thank you for all the great advice over the last couple of years. I only wish I would have found this podcast years ago.
Pamela, it's never too late.
No, never.
Never too late at all. She essentially has a 60% stock portfolio. Pamela, you have about 60% in stocks. The dry powder, I want to clarify this a little bit. You essentially have 30% in cash, 10% in bonds. To me, dry powder doesn't have to be just cash. It can be a bond-oriented ETF fund, however you want to invest in it, or individual bonds. But if you're 30% of your 40, so 3/4 of your dry powder is in cash, it's already probably seen a lowering in yield because the Fed has just cut rates twice over the last, call it 2 months. So you've already had that probably adjust lower, and why you would potentially rather have fixed income or a bond-oriented fund is that if you've got a 5-year bond or the average is 5 years and it's paying 4%, remember you have that somewhat locked in. And if rates go down to 3 from the Fed funds rate or 2, that would be kind of extreme from where we are today. But you still are getting the 4% or 4.5% from the bond that you locked in. So that's the whole point of having not just cash, because it adjusts almost instantly to where the Fed sets rates. The reason we have fixed income is that you should have a longer lock-in, like a longer-term CD, right? A 30-day CD is going to expire and reset. A 5-year CD keeps that same rate for the whole duration. And that's why the way I look at some of this, your dry powder can be in fixed income bonds that have longer periods of time where you get you locked in a higher interest rate.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and then we come back. Second act careers.
Oh, we've got a 1 in a million second act career. Welcome back to Ask an Advisor, Wes Moss, along with Krista DiBiase. Second act careers.
I can't wait to hear this story.
You used to be a barista. We learned that at the beginning of the show. You babysat, barista.
Retail.
You were an art categorizer.
I did tons of retail jobs. I was an RA also in college. I worked in the food
resident
service.
Advisor.
Yeah, so you got free room and board.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've
Were you
done
a
a lot
tough
of
RA?
jobs.
Were you?
No.
Is it like a disciplinary thing?
I mean, you have to like kind of patrol and stuff. But more than that, I
wouldn't be messing around. If you were my RA, I would make sure I was totally in line if I were in college in a dorm.
You're supposed to be a support system for the students
support.
too. I had freshmen the first year I was an RA, and that was more support. And then I was an RA for sophomores my senior year, and that was that involved a little more watching out for danger.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
I believe it. Well, let's talk about, so I don't know if you ever are going to revisit some of these careers, but this is a story about a 58-year-old named Tom Sillo, and his second act career was really pursuing something that was something that he felt slipped him by, and it was a purpose that he missed and always had this desire to kind of make up for this lost time. And it's Tom Sillo, and this is a true story. It was in the Wall Street Journal. He's 58 years old. He's from my home state of Pennsylvania. And he's in Lycoming or Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And there's a college there called Lycoming College. And he's 58 years old. and he is playing college football
What?
for the Lycoming College Warriors. Is that not crazy?
That is crazy.
He's not the water boy. He's not a coach.
I was going to say.
He's not an instructor in the weight room. He is playing football on the team.
Wow. So there are no.
Now, technically, he's been on their JV, it seems like, but
Okay.
he may have already gotten some snaps on varsity. We don't know. And this is real. It's not some publicity thing. This is a guy, and I'm gonna say that this sounds crazy, and I have a warning here as I was writing this. It was kind of warning / smiley face, is that it reminds us this is a 1 in a million. And I'll tell you about he's this guy who stayed in shape. This is not somebody who's like, oh, I think I'm going to get in shape. He's already a big guy, 6 feet tall, 220 pounds, always stayed really in shape in the gym. So he's in there. He started in shape. So it was a possibility. I mean, it seems nuts. He's almost 60 years old. But it to me, it's just a reminder that this is, yes, kind of a 1 in a million second act career. But it's a nudge, I think, for the rest of us to just push ourselves a little bit further than we might think right out of the gate. Your second act, it doesn't need to be like the next Netflix series, but which this could be. It just needs to stretch us beyond our comfort zone. And knowing that somebody has done something this seemingly extreme, I think it just helps us all push a little harder when thinking about, okay, what could I do next? The real life story is that he worked for the city, basically Parks and Rec. He did Parks and Rec for a long time, City Parks Department. And he always worked out, kept strong. I think he did some competitive weightlifting. So he's a lot of stature for Tom Sillo. 220 pounds. And he met, I don't know how he got the meeting. That'll be in the Netflix series, I'm sure. But he met with the coach of the Lycoming Warriors, Lycoming College, Mike Clark. And Mike's 54. Tom's 58. They're sitting down. He's like, I want to meet with you, coach. And I'd like to play football. And he goes, what do you mean? He was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? You're 58, man. So I want to play football. He didn't even play high school football because he had a drug and alcohol problem.
Wow.
When he was in his teens, and he fell into the wrong crowd. He fell off track, and he never got to do something that deep down he always wanted to do, but he didn't even have the shot to do it. So maybe part of his life working out, he was trying to do something to make up for that. But I guess he's looking at these 18-year-old kids. He say, look, I'm just as big and just as strong as a lot of these kids. How can I not just play nose tackle? It's possible. Crazy, but possible. Mike Clark eventually took him serious, even though seriously he thought it was a joke. He said, well, let's see how you do in the weight room. Let's come and meet the kids. And these 18-year-olds are like, what is this? Is this guy a new coach? And he's in the weight room, and he's stronger than most of the 18-year-olds.
Wow.
He's like, and they're like, they call him the animal. So he's a super tough guy. He's super strong. He's in shape. And yes, he is sore, and he's stretching, and he's doing ice baths. But he also has an NIL deal from an arthritis cream, which of course he does. We'll probably see him on an Icy Hot commercial along with Shaq.
That's awesome.
One of these days.
Good for him. That's amazing.
So it's an unfinished purpose that Tom's solving for. I think we all got that. If you really think about it, there's something that you missed out on in your life that you probably wanted to do and you never got a chance to do it.
Yeah. There's someone we work with, and he's always wanted to be able to kick a field goal. I don't know if it's an extra point length or what it is, but he's been working on it all year. Like in his 50s, practicing.
Sounds like Tom Sillo wanted to make the kicking team, never could because he was working, or I don't know what it was.
I've been doing this thing lately. I have a friend who owns a food shop. Like it's a little food shop and you can eat there. And she also goes to farmers markets on Saturdays and sells food. And she's been short-staffed. And so some Friday nights I've been going there and I work until 11 or 12. Yeah, I help cook the food for the farmers markets. I'm being paid in like tacos and other food, but I love the two ladies I'm working with, and we play music, and it's been super fun for me to do something totally different where I'm just like working. I mean, I get it's so you get so hot in there, and you're just cooking, and I'm learning how to cook new things, and it's been a blast for me to just change it up.
I've got to check this out. I'm ringing the bell. That is awesome. But look, this is work can be fun. I know from our research that we don't want to be working in retirement because we have to and we need the extra money. That is not good for our overall happiness. We want to be able to be doing something that's fulfilling a sense of purpose. And what Tom is doing that. He's feeding his purpose. In a lot of ways, this keeps us feeling young. In his case, probably on both ends of the extreme. Feel really young playing college football. You probably feel really old after you're done a game. The community and connection is extraordinary with this entire team. They didn't like the idea of it in the beginning. Now they love this guy.
Yep. And
then the challenge that keeps us active and keeps us curious and keeps us learning. And you put all that together, it is hard. And I've done some recent research around this. Retirees, even if they've got some second acts and they've got core pursuits, they do struggle. Very few of them say they're doing great when it comes to their sense of purpose. It's hard to really, a lot of the folks I've surveyed that say they feel pretty good about it. But it's kind of rare for somebody to say, yeah, I have an awesome or great sense of purpose in my retirement years. Let's just keep thinking about that.
Okay, we'll go to questions. AJ in Oklahoma wrote, "Hello, Wes. I recently got a substantial raise at work. This has started my wife and I on smart ways to steward our money. We have lofty goals and a general plan to achieve those goals, but I feel really unsure how to begin, and I question if it's a good plan. Would a financial advisor be beneficial for us, or should we educate ourselves on how to reach our goals? Thank you."
I think the Clark Howard show, Ask an Advisor, can start to help, AJ. Let me do I probably need one of these cards to always be able to quickly know exactly the amount of money per year, times the number of years, times the rate of return gets you to what. But I do have the one for $1 million memorized. And if you want to do that in 20 years, think about this. 20 times 25 times 6 equals $1 million. And what am I doing there? I'm doing 20 years. So if you're 30 by age 50, it's 20 years times 25K per year. Call that $2,000 a month, times a 6% ROR, rate of return. That gets you roughly to $1 million. So think about this: no matter what age you are, well, even if you're under 50, you can do 23.5 into a 401k. Just that maxing out, if you were to do that for 20 years, times an average of 6%, which hopefully is low for the U.S. stock market, maybe more for a balanced portfolio, mathematically does get you there to $1 million. And I think that to me, people like goalposts, people like targets, and I like having a target of $1 million or $1.5 million or $2 million or whatever that number is, because then you can quickly back up, do the math, and know, well, I can try to solve this puzzle little by little over time. I'm going to just make sure, Krista, that I'm doing this math right. I'm going to do
the math. And while you're doing that, I just want to say, I mean, good for you, AJ, for thinking about this raise in the way you are, because so many people, I mean, I've probably done this in the past years ago too. Like you think, oh, could I get a bigger house now? Could I get a new car? Whatever it is, and you really want to utilize this raise to build your future. And I think that's awesome.
I just got 975K. Yeah.
Great.
So just think of it this way: 20 years at 25K a year at a 6% rate of return, you're at $1 million. If you were to get a 7% rate of return over that period of time, it'd be about more like $1.1 million.
All right. Alex in Michigan says, "I recently retired and was wondering what Wes thinks of tips and a tips ladder."
Alex in Michigan.
Your favorite.
It is kind of one of my favorite states. So tips, Treasury inflation protected securities. These are U.S. Treasury bonds that give you a little bit of a yield and an inflation adjustment for whatever CPI is. So if you think you have $10,000 in tips, inflation's 3% for the year, you get a 1% rate of return on that. Or let's say the yield is 1.5% for the tip, which is, again, they're usually Treasury inflation-protected securities are going to usually have a lower yield than a regular Treasury because you also get the inflation bump up. So if inflation's 3 and your coupon or your yield was 1.5, now you're at 4.5%. So your value adjusts higher. Your 10,000 now is 10,300 after the 3% CPI, and these are treasuries, so they're highly safe. You're just gambling, usually getting a lower rate, banking that there's going to be inflation. Interestingly, and you can do this you can buy these directly. They come in 5 and 10 and 30 year maturity if you're going to buy actual tips. And I think you've got to go to Treasury Direct to do that. But there are also lots of ETFs or funds that do this for you. So you can just buy a tip related bond ETF, and it's doing that for you. Now, if you look at tips, a tip ETF versus the general market on total or the overall bond market, think the Barclays Aggregate Bond Index, they look pretty darn similar on a total return basis.
Okay. Nate in Florida says, hey, Wes, love the show. You often talk about incorporating dividend investing into a retirement portfolio and income strategy, and it makes sense. But I also hear counter arguments, including the fact that dividends aren't really free money, but instead a reshuffling of value because the company's stock price typically drops by the dividend amount when paid out. Can you help me better understand some of the mechanics of dividends and why dividend investing is a good retirement income strategy versus alternate investing approaches?
So first, Nate, you bring up a good point, is that if a company is paying out their shareholders a dividend, let's just say they have $100 million on the balance sheet and their dividend's $20 million that gets paid out to thousands and thousands of folks. There's $20 million less at the company. Mm-hmm. So in a vacuum, that company has just had value. It's essentially spent money. It's spent it. It's cash out to you.
Kind of profit sharing in a way, if you think about it.
That is one way to look at it. Yeah. So in a vacuum, that is somewhat true. But I will also say, even though I'm a big believer in dividend investing, it is not. Investing is philosophical in some ways. You can make an argument that companies that never pay anything out because every dollar is going back into growth, they don't pay a dividend. We've seen a lot of wonderful stocks that are that way. So there's no right or wrong answer. There's just different ways or styles of looking at the market and looking at equities. But to me, dividend investing is very much about discipline and financial health. Mm-hmm. And slightly more mature or methodical growth. When a company starts paying a dividend, they loathe to ever cut it. It is a terrible sign that a company would ever lower their amount they're paying out. The goal of a company is to just raise it year after year after year. And that really instills a lot of financial discipline to the company. They still have to grow because they want to grow their cash flow so they can continue to raise the dividend. So to me, you get a lot of other intangibles. You may get a business not growing quite as fast, but there's a lot of discipline. And there's some maturity typically in that business. And the board is holding the management, their feet to the fire to say, look, we're raising the dividend. That's the way we do this. And companies that are able to do that, there is something about that predictability that I really like. And over time, you can see similar returns from dividend companies and the total return versus companies that are growth oriented. It's just slightly two different roads to travel to get somewhere. I think the dividend paying companies do particularly well when you get closer to retirement and you do need to take money out. Sometimes that dividend itself, that cash flow can be pay the bills, be really comforting from an investment perspective, and it can help you be a more patient investor. Mm-hmm. If you're growth only, you only get the only way you're going to make money is appreciation. You got to wait for the appreciation. So if you're in a big dip, it's not a time to take from a growth-oriented company that's down 20 or 30%. But a dividend, even though a dividend stock may be down in price, it doesn't mean the dividend amount should go down unless they cut, which they don't like to do, companies. So two different ways of looking at it. You're not wrong on the shifting of value when a company pays out a dividend. But I think both can work. Remember, we're all after the same formula. Total return equals growth plus income. I like to have a little of both to get to total return.
Okay. Well, that's it for us this week on Ask an Advisor. Clark will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of The Clark Howard Show. Thank you so much for being with us. Hope the rest of your day is great. Thank you so much, Wes.
Thank you, Krista.